I'm in a good mood today. We recorded the first, we started watching the first show for the light side video, the next light side video, and it's an actually good show that me and May are halfway through, and it's having a great time with it. So there is good anime. There's good anime on the horizon, guys. There's good anime on the horizon. But May just went to work, so instead of finishing that show, I gotta get to work on the dark side list. Let's see what we got here in the old randomizer. 25. That is Gamers. I've heard Gamers is actually supposed to be really good. Basically, I told May I'll check it out and let you know. So, hopefully, I'm about to be in for another pleasant surprise. Let's find out. This Gamers show, it seems serviceable. I don't know if I have room in my heart right now for a high school anime that's anything less than incredible. Like, the main characters in this show are pretty standard and boring. It's a gag, it's like a romantic comedy gag series where the main character guy is a big nerd gamer. The prettiest girl in school happens to also secretly be a gamer. Not even really secretly, she just is and no one's really asked her about it. And she makes a gaming club, so they're both in the gaming club. And there's other characters that none of whom have left any impact on me, getting most of the way through episode 1. And I've just kind of been bored. It's just pretty boring. I mean, its take on video gaming is extremely basic. You know, it's just they just like games. They make game references here and there. Nothing that grips me in the gaming element, nor the romantic comedy element. From what I can read on, I was looking up stuff about the show online, and everyone seems to say it's a show that's about lots of misunderstandings. It's mostly like a misunderstanding-driven romance, and that is my least favorite kind of romantic comedy show. I can't stand watching characters constantly misinterpret each other and go around in circles. I got enough of that out of Ranma 1/2 to last me a lifetime. So, yeah, I'm not interested in this one. I don't care enough. Alright, let's play the game. 21. That is Sugu Momo, I believe. I think that's the fan service show that the manga used to always get posted on A. So let's see if it's any good. Well, that's exactly what it looked like. A action fan service magical girlfriend show couched in Japanese mythology that feels like it was made 15 years ago. Seriously, the character designs and just overall look and feel of the show is like 2002 harem show, but it's from current year. So that's weird. I don't like it. It's exactly as good as one of the shows from back then, which were not good. Let's move along. 11. That is... What does that say? What the fuck does that say? Kira... Oh, is this the Precure? I never end up watching these. I always end up watching, like, one episode of the new Precure. Well, let's at least see if it's... one of the more interesting Precures. And maybe I'll watch it. But if it's not immediately deeply gripping, I'm putting it on hold along with every other Precure until I finish Heartcatch. Actually, looking at this, I realized I did try to watch the first episode of this back, like, towards the end of the winter season. I tried to watch this and Hinako Note, and both of them I was not that interested in. This one, I remember I didn't even finish the first episode. I was just kind of like, oh, this is just, this is just a baby show, and I've got 20 other seasons of it I could watch. So we're gonna go ahead and just say we're just gonna go ahead and skip Kira Precure a la mode, because there's no way I'm fucking finishing it before the year's over. I've got other magical girl shows on my plate. 40. 40 is See, why did I write none of these in language I can understand? It's got a 3P at the end, so let's just search the 3P. Is it Tenshi no 3P? Tenshi no 3P? We'll find out. So I actually watched a whole episode of Tenshi no 3P and just checked out episode 2 a little bit to sort of confirm my feelings on it. And I have no ill will towards this show. It's just that it's pretty obvious what it's going for, and I'm not that interested in watching the whole thing. It's not enough a show I really want to watch. But I actually liked the first episode, and I mean, this was one, when I saw the image on Crunchyroll, which is like 3 cute lollies in like really detailed clothes holding musical instruments, I thought, huh, this has potential to be right up my alley, because it's cute girls playing music, two things I am very a fan of. But I also immediately had like I could tell it was a light novel adaptation, from the character designs alone, and then also just like watching the first episode was pretty obvious, and it really gave me a strong Rokubu vibe, the lolly basketball show. So when I later learned that it's from the same original author, I was not at all surprised. I was like, oh, yeah, of course, it's the same author, and it feels very similar to that show. In fact, the plot is basically the same. It's a somewhat older guy, in this case a high school student, who ends up coaching a group of elementary school girls. Although I think in Rokubu they were actually high school girls, they just looked like elementary school girls. But in this show, it's elementary school girls who, he's essentially coaching them in something that they're passionate about. And it's just all about them, like, looking up to him helping them with what will probably be, you know, a somewhat emotional journey to, you know, do the thing they want to do and get better at it. So, you know, this one's a lot less fan service driven than Lolly Basketball was, and that show, I actually watched like 7 or 8 episodes of that. It's kind of a fond memory, because that's how I learned to drink. I decided I could only watch that show if I was drinking, so, and I had all these beers, all this Bud Light in a mini fridge that had been given to me. And so I taught myself how to drink beer by drinking while watching Rokubu, but ultimately I couldn't make it through the whole show, because even though that show and this one are surprisingly okay, they are competent shows with characters who you kind of want to root for because they're very sincere, and they just want to do good, and they're adorable, but there's no depth to it. It's just, it's a lolly. It's a show for if you want to watch cute lollies who are passionate about something and feel, you know, like vicariously experience guiding them through life with a decently relatable lead character, then you might enjoy this. But despite being a lolicon, I would prefer to, like, there's plenty of shows, there's plenty of good anime with cute girls in them that I can watch, as opposed to this, you know? And the fact that this is so transparent about, like, its kind of creepiness, there's definitely a creepiness to it, that it's difficult to actually sit through. But, you know, I actually thought the first episode was pretty okay. The main character really took me back to my high school years, because he's a hikikomori who sits up in his room and makes music. And we see him, like, working in digital audio workstations and stuff. He's very passionate about playing guitar. You know, he's a big fan of, he's got like a Jimi Hendrix poster and a Foo Fighters t-shirt, so we've got some like real world musical references, neither of which I was ever that into, but like I spent a lot of time sitting around in Apple Loops as a teen trying to make music, you know, and he's on a fucking Mac computer, which I was trapped on back in high school, so I saw a lot of myself in him. He spends time talking on instant messengers. And there's some cool visualizations here where when he's talking to someone on Instant Messenger, it sort of shows him and that person in like a white space having a conversation, but it's how he imagines the person. So it's not like necessarily who they actually are, but like the conversation he's imagining himself have. And when he gets an email from someone who seems like an older guy interested in discussing his music with him, like he's thinking he's getting a record deal or something, because he's been posting this stuff online, the way he reacts to the email, like I've felt that way to this day when I get emails with offers and stuff, which I actually do get. I feel that way when I answer an email. Just everything about the way he acts and interacts with people, I found relatable. He's a loner hikikomori character who doesn't come off as like overly edgy and like he's not a hikikomori because he's like bullied or because he has all these negative thoughts about the world. He just kind of is a loner guy who doesn't want to go to school. He'd rather be at home making stuff, and I find that easy to relate to. And his the way he posts his music online is also very relatable, where he sort of constructs these songs and then works with an illustrator who, like basically the reason he's able to have any success with his music being posted online is because there's this popular, well, semi-popular illustrator who, allows him to post his songs with her images. So, like, that's why he has the meager following that he does have, and he's only posted like a few songs. So we're kind of early in the career of like a YouTube music creator, and it's all, again, presented very realistically. Lots of shows would have him upload something and it gets a fucking million views overnight, even though there's no advertising pull whatsoever. The fact that they acknowledge that like the artist being attached is why it gets any views, and that it was like a modest amount that seems reasonable, it just all felt real to me, especially as a Japanese music producer. Like his music sounds like everything that's posted on like Nico Nico Doga and YouTube. So like, this felt very real to me. And the way the episode is directed is interesting too, where it's very quiet and sort of stoic. In spite of the show being about music, most of the times that we hear music, it's through like headphones, like someone's listening to music on headphones, but we don't hear the whole song. So yeah, I liked the way that the episode was directed, especially in the first half, where we're just sort of immersing ourselves in the main character. But the main thrust of the show is that there's these 3 adorable elementary school orphan girls who, one of them's a huge fan of his, sends him an email asking to meet up, and when they do meet up, they reveal that what they want to do is to perform a concert at the church that is their orphanage, and they want him to help them to put on this show because they figured out that he lived close to them and they are big fans of his music, which is kind of a neat idea. But like, they're all, of course, like insanely professional tier musicians. Like, they put on a show for him and it's like they play perfectly and it's this incredibly well constructed pop song. I don't think they wrote the song themselves or anything. In fact, it might have been one of his songs that they added lyrics to. It wasn't clear, but like, yeah, they can play really well. And so what I'm kind of expecting to happen is that they will form a group together. Like, eventually they'll put on this show, probably by the end of what would be book 1 of the light novels, and then they would decide to make a band together or something like that. And I could easily see that being how he actually does launch a career, is by having this cute girl outfit that he's sort of performing with, like a baby metal kind of situation, except the girls actually play the instruments. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that the 3 girls are so, like, soft and fluffy, lolly archetype characters that they're totally unbelievable. Like, whereas the main character is extremely believable, the 3 little girls are, like, total fantasy characters. And that's where the separation kind of happens, where, like, if this was a show, like, I'm interested in the concept. I'm interested in the idea of, like, a bedroom musician achieving fame by having this, like, front of the cute little girls and the musician, or the artist who works with him. Like, that could be a cool concept, but, like, the fact that it's couched in this wish fulfillment lolly fantasy that is, not bad, but it's also not interesting. So, I can't see myself sitting through it, and I can tell it's going to be very sentimental and sort of self-serious, which I'm not a big fan of. So yeah, this is a show I can easily see certain people liking. It actually has decent reviews on Mal, but all of them hint heavily that they are big lolicons who are watching it, or don't even hint, they just state. So, I think this is a show that the crowd who is going to like it is going to find out about it and watch it. But anyone else, you can probably stay away. Personally, I'm only so interested. But I was surprised how well done the show is, which I also felt about Rokubu. but neither one is a show that's like so good I need to watch it, and definitely not something that would ever show up on like my top 10 of the year list or anything like that. It'd probably be a 6 at best if I actually watched the whole thing, and I felt like I'd need to be drunk to do that. So I'm going to drop it, but this is the first time on the dark mode list that I'm not dropping it with ill will, just dropping it because I'm not that interested. We're actually like a fourth of the way through this already. I've already dropped 10 shows, so we're making great progress here. And like, this is not even, like, I didn't even list, like, some people might be thinking, why did you list so much stuff that looks like it'll be shitty? I only listed stuff that I thought at least had a fighting chance. Like, there's tons of shit I didn't even put on this list. Tons of shows that came out this year that I just outright said, well, that looks really bad, so I'm not including that. This is just stuff I was at least curious enough about to give a fighting chance. Although there are a few things on here that I knew would not be good, but, whatever. Alright, let's see what we get. Number 30. What's that? Where's 30 at? We got Knights and Magic. That's a really generic name. Let's see if it's a really generic show. So, is Knights and Magic a generic show? Yes and no. In fact, I feel like it's kind of a really niche specific show trapped inside of the skin of a generic show, which is kind of the most unfortunate thing about it, because I think the people who this show is meant to appeal to are not going to watch it because of the generic aspect. And the people who the generic aspect is trying to drag in are not going to like the weird niche specific thing. So this is an isekai show. A guy goes to another world, of course, high fantasy, as the title suggests, except it's also a mecha show. It's a world where there's mechs, for no apparent reason, and there's mech fighting. Now, what the focus of this show is on, according to a bunch of reviews I've read, is mech battles. The show is all about mech battles, mech customization, the progress of enhancing these mechs so that they work better, and that's basically the point. And yet, it's trapped within this really boilerplate isekai show that the first episode, which I just watched most of, is like rushing through all the isekai elements as fast as it can. Like, it has no interest in being that kind of show. It just has to, because that's what a light novel is, which is really a shame. And the concept is actually almost interesting, except that it's, like, again, it's presented in such a way where it's trying to cut out all of the fluff of stuff that, like, would get someone invested in a show so it can get to mech battles. So, like, the first episode, we're introduced to a main character who's an obsessive mecha fan who is and also, like, an all-star programmer. He's, like, an amazing programmer, and, of course, he gets hit by a car and taken to another world, but this sequence is presented really bizarrely, because it's not like he jumps out trying to save somebody or anything like that. He's just, like, kind of stops in the middle of the road, and, like, he looks over, and we see a car, and we see him, and we see the car, and then it cuts to black, and then it cuts to a funeral. Like, you know what's going on. It's an isekai show. Of course he's gonna get sent to another world. The weird part is he gets sent to another world, but he's reincarnated. So he's actually, like, born in this world as a child, but somehow has all the memories of having been an adult. They don't explain that at all. Like, it just kind of happens. Like, we are introduced to this kid, and we see the moment that he first sees one of the mechs, and he has the thought, oh, this is why I was reincarnated into this world, so I could pilot mechs. And we were like, wait, you didn't even establish that you were reincarnated here. And then it just starts blitzing through his life story, like him growing up, going to, like, a magical academy because you use magic to pilot the mechs, so he becomes, like, an amazing magician because apparently using magic works the same way that code does, but that's not explored at all. It's just stated in the way through this, like, this wash of information. He meets these two kids from seemingly random chance, and then a narrator's like, and then those kids became his best friends forever, and then we just cut to now they're his best friends. I don't know why we even had to bother, like, meeting them. Why not just why not just have them be his friends? We didn't have to see the moment they met because we don't get any development of their friendship. They just are friends now. And then, like, basically he's going to build his own mech so that he can pilot it because he's still a kid, but he already knows how to do it. And yeah, again, it's just rushing through all this so that by episode 2 they can get him in a mech and get him piloting with this idea that he, fought for all this time, trained himself up to be able to do this out of his passion for mecha, which sounds cool, except that there's no emotional weight to it because we literally just shot through, 12 years of his life or whatever. So, you don't have that sensation of, catharsis that should come from this. And then from what I read online, it apparently just becomes mech battles from then on out. So I think there's definitely a crowd who's supposed to enjoy this show. If you love mechs and you love customization of mechs, which most mech fans I think do. I'm thinking of my brother Victor, who grew up a gigantic mecha fan and a gigantic customization fan. But even he's, too old to watch this show now. He probably wouldn't care enough about the fact that it just has mecha to sit through an isekai show with pretty terrible writing, really bad pacing, and just, kind of a confusing narrative. I don't know if he could make it through that just to watch, this very niche thing. Maybe when he was a kid he would have liked this show. But, yeah, I found myself struck by the fact that, it simultaneously is more and less interesting than it seems. So, definitely not my kind of show. I've never been a huge mecha guy. Definitely not someone who can watch a show just for mechs. And also, I can't stand isekai shows. So, while this was kind of fascinating to behold, I have no interest in continuing. Roll the dice, baby! 33. I think we got that already. No, we got 32 before. 33 is... What the fuck does this say? Nana... Meh. Not... I didn't even try. Let's find out what this is. Okay, I think it's Nanamaru Sanbatsu, so let's try that one. So I ended up watching 2 whole episodes of Nanamaru Sanbatsu, which is a perfectly fine show that I can only recommend to people who are legitimately way into quiz shows. Because this is the Quiz Boy show. It's a show about... It's basically a shonen sports thing, in spite of the fact that it's actually based on a seinen manga, but in every way, it is shonen sports du jour, about something called Quiz Bowl, which is where it's like buzzer-beating quiz games. So, that's the point of it. It's just like a shy, nerdy kid, doesn't want to join any school clubs, but there's a cute girl who's passionate about quizzes, and she sort of recruits him to join the quiz club with great reluctance. And, the first 2 episodes are just sort of about introducing the nature of Quiz Bowl and sort of getting you into it and, showing some quiz games and watching this kid, slowly develop friendships with the other people in the group, as well as learn to like quiz. And it's perfectly competently made. It's not exceptional, but there's nothing wrong with it. I actually like the character designs a good bit. They feel very like something you'd see in a Mamoru Hosoda film, like The Girl Who Leapt Through Time or something. Not quite the style of I won't say The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, rather like Summer Wars, because Girl Who Leapt Through Time is the designer of Evangelion, and it's not quite like that, but it's close. It's a similar feel to what you would get in a Mamoru Hosoda film. But, other than that, it's just a high school sports anime about quizzes. And I think my biggest problem with the show is that it kind of goes, right in on, the quiz questions being pretty hard. Maybe just because I don't have a lot of random trivial knowledge about shit that's not anime. But, the first basic quizzes that we get in episode 1 were already shit I didn't really know the answer to. It was stuff I was familiar with once I heard the answer, but didn't know the answer. And it ramps up in intensity really fast because, one of the core components of the buzzer-beating game is that, you're meant to... be able to recognize a question as early as possible into it being asked and, get in there quick. So most of the time, like when you're watching this show, you don't get the chance to sort of figure out what the question's going to be yourself because the characters are all sort of high level right from the start. Um, and so, like, when there's long sequences of quiz playing, I kind of felt like the fun of it, like the fun of watching a quiz show, is getting to guess the answers along with it. But I think there's a reason that shows like Jeopardy aren't like total buzzer beaters. I mean, they kind of are, but like, it's a little slower and you have more time to think and process it. And the questions on screen as opposed to being read out loud. I mean, it's both, but like, you get to read it as it's being spoken. Whereas in this show, it's just like they speak the question, and then you only see the full question afterwards so that you can get the dramatic effect of the characters having gotten it way early. But yeah, so it just kind of made the quiz scenes go over my head. There was like legit, I think, 2 questions I knew the answer to in time with when they were answered in the show. I'm trying to remember what the one... God damn it. There was one I guess like as... Because there's a couple like otaku-oriented questions for no reason, which is dumb, but like one of them sort of hinted at earlier in the episode, so I only knew the answer because they had kind of given it away. And then there was one question I knew the answer to immediately. I don't remember what it was in episode 2. Anyways, I fucking just went off into my own world there trying to remember that. Yeah, ultimately I found the show it's very standard. Like, there's nothing, again, exceptional about it. It's just a sports show about quizzes. And I don't think quizzes are a game that's inherently fun to watch unless you happen to be able to participate. And I could not. So if you happen to be someone who loves quizzes and has tons of random trivial knowledge, you might enjoy this show. Although it's also very, like, Japan-centric, where there were a couple questions where, like, I did know the answers because they were questions that are only difficult if you're Japanese. Like, one part they were asking, like, there's stars on the American flag. What do the stars represent? Or they represent the states. How many are there? Like, as an American, you would know this if you were 1 year old, yeah, so if you are big into quizzes, maybe watch this show. Otherwise, I can't really recommend it. Let's move on. Alright, number time. Where the fuck's the mouse? There we go. Number 3. That is Seiden. I don't know anything about Seiden. Let's look at it. It didn't even seem that terrible, but I just could not be asked to give the slightest amount of fuck. Let's see. What's number 7? I already did that. 18. 18 is Kado. This is another one that people have recommended to me. That's supposed to be kind of alright. I think it's a CG show, though, so we'll see. Jesus fucking Christ. That may have been the worst experience I've had in this series so far. Because I just experienced an anti-spiral. In Gurren Lagann, where the anti-spirals would always let the heroes come close to winning before they just crushed them even harder just to break their will and spirit. That's how I feel about Kado. Because this show began as an incredibly pleasant surprise. In fact, the whole first half of this show is badass. I was so excited. I started this the other night, and I was immediately taken aback by how good the first 2 episodes were. This show, it basically is Arrival. Like, the plot of the movie Arrival, but if you skip to the end, where the point becomes clear, and then it becomes sort of The Martian after that, where it's about an alien life form comes to Earth, and through a set of circumstances, he ends up working closely with a negotiator who works for the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And basically, this negotiator is sort of his envoy to communicate with the human race. And his goal is to advance humanity. He has come bearing these gifts of his sort of extra dimensional being, and wants to advance humanity at a more rapid rate than it's currently advancing at. And so the first 6 episodes of this show is this very tense political thriller that, while slow, is incredibly well directed and keeps you on the edge of your seat. Not a lot really happens in each episode, but it's very careful about how it doles out information. It feels like a negotiation. Like the show is playing it close to the chest and trying to keep, feeding you stuff at just the right pace and allowing you to process it and allowing humanity to process the information, because this is all happening in a relatively fast time span because of the scale of what's going on. That these are fundamental changes to the nature of how humans will exist on Earth. And it's fairly heady stuff. It's a show that is willing to throw a lot of, scientific terms at you to sort of belt its way through the effects, like scientifically, that these advances would have on humanity. It kind of assumes something about science and the singularity and like where technology would go if it was more advanced. It assumes a lot on the part of the intelligence of the viewer. So it feels like a smart show. It's not like perfect. It doesn't go into every facet in detail. It might even seem too hopeful about humanity for a lot of it. Like, humanity has a certain trepidation about these advanced technologies, and it definitely affects the world government in ways where there's some conflict, but for the most part, things go over pretty well, and it seems pretty hopeful, which is why I compared it to The Martian, which was a movie about nonstop advancing. It was about humanity never stopping, never falling behind, just always charging forward with advancements, and it felt like that's where this show was going. And initially, I didn't even want to, I didn't want to spoil anything. I was planning my review of this to be an incredibly positive review because I was having a great time. This was like a strong 8 for me for the first half. Legit my second favorite show I've watched this year so far. And then somehow it crashes and burns so spectacularly as to be unbelievable. It feels like the second half of the show is written by a different person. It's hard to believe that it goes downhill as thoroughly as it does. And there's a few factors at play in why that happens. First of all, so our alien being throughout the series, he's been slowly learning about humanity while introducing concepts to them. And the most interesting idea of the show is, how is this guy planning to advance humanity? What things is he giving them, and how will humanity react to receiving these things? These are the two most interesting factors. These kind of go out the window in the second half, where the focus becomes more on the morality of changing the world at the pace we're changing it. Whether or not we should go through with changing the world at this breakneck pace. And while there are lots of interesting questions there, the way the show approaches these questions is obnoxious. It kind of is like it doesn't present the idea that these advancements will damage humanity in any kind of logical way. It's more like it doesn't feel right. That's kind of the way it's presented. It's but this isn't how it's supposed to go. Humanity's supposed to evolve naturally. It's not supposed to just be forced on it by some other higher being. And I'm like, that's irrelevant. That's not the interesting conversation to have here. There is an interesting conversation to have about the morality of this, but this is not the one. And for a little bit, it wasn't clear if it was going to go down that path. It kind of seemed like it was just presenting another worldview, a not particularly interesting one, but one that was okay, we could acknowledge this worldview, but let's continue with the science, But then things just go way out of hand. Because when the alien guy reveals his next, the next thing he's planning to give to humanity to the negotiator, he then spills the beans on what he is, and that the aliens that he's a part of basically created the universe as a way to give them information because they have a thirst for information and they wanted to create a giant dense pocket of information. So they created a universe, and humanity is the first pocket of information. It goes way overboard. Now, I had always appreciated up to this point that the show would explain all of its sci-fi shit. Like, even though it's talking about, like, extra-dimensional stuff, it will go ahead and explain it. Like, it tries to give a scientific explanation for everything, even if it's on, like, a nuclear level, or, not a nuclear, what's the fucking word for physics, but it's in the universe? You know what I'm talking about. I'm not a fucking science boy. Theoretical physics. That's what I mean to say. It goes way all out on explaining its crazy shit, and it's like just plausible enough to be fun and like you can play along. But when this dude explains the nature of the higher beings, it just goes into full anime territory. And then there's a moment where he's like, well, negotiator guy, since you don't want to bring these advancements to humanity, I've got a clone of you from a few hours ago who I'm going to convince to do that, and I'm going to kill you. And this is where it's crossed the line for me, because the show has never been like an action show. It's never been violent. There's never been a hint. No one's died in spite of all the crazy shit that's happening. It has been a calm show about negotiation. It has been a mature show led almost entirely by conversations about the advancement of humanity. And then the alien guy summons a giant energy blade out of his hand, and he goes to kill the main character. And then this one girl, who's like one of the side characters, the one who has this alternate perspective, just suddenly turns out to also be an extra-dimensional being, and she rushes in and blocks the sword in a badass action sequence. And then the rest of the show is about the humans fighting against the alien guy, and there's a romance between the main character and the alien girl. And in the last episode, at this point I was skipping through, like the last 2 episodes, I was like, I can't fucking take this anymore, and I was just skipping through. But in the last episode, like, main guy and extra-dimensional girl have a daughter, and she comes from the future and kills the bad guy, and what the fuck happened? What happened? This show went from being comparable to the likes of Arrival, like a very slow-paced, kind of plotting, careful series, into just batshit anime insanity. And it killed it, like, immediately. The second that he started explaining the origins of the extra-dimensional beings, it just went out the window. The whole show went completely out the window. I've never stopped caring about something so fast. Like, when I saw the big energy blade and the girl jumped in and blocked it, I was just like, there's no coming back from that. There's no coming back from that. You killed it. You ruined it. How did you ruin it so badly when the first half was so good? This show, it was like, it's like clearly a low-budget series from Toei. All of the main characters are CG models, even though the backgrounds and, like, side characters are 2D. Like, the main characters are 3D models that are just kind of posed basically. This is a show about talking. It didn't need to have strong visuals. But in spite of that, it actually does, like, the giant cube thing that the alien comes out of is cool looking. There's lots of, like, neat effects when they're trying to show off, like, the alien powers. They do cool visual stuff. The soundtrack is awesome. The soundtrack, like, sells the show. Like, it sells the presentation. It carries all the dramatic tension in the show. It's got some memorable songs that will really stick with you. It's like, the first half of the show is fucking great. And then it just bottoms out and becomes total garbage. I give this show a 5 out of 10. Because the cognitive dissonance I feel between how much I loved the first half and how violently I hated the second half, I don't even know what else to say. Like, I can't give it above a 5 because I can't recommend it. Like, it gets that bad. Like, it ruins the first half. Everything that was interesting going on in the first half doesn't matter anymore. Like, forget about it. Forget this show. Like, it wasn't worth it. They ruined what they had. And I don't know if I can give it a below a 5 because the first half was that good, but like I wouldn't watch it again. You know, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. What the fuck happened here, man? I don't understand how this happened. I don't understand how a mature talkie show suddenly became giant anime battle, killing god, spectacle, daughter from the future. What the fuck was that about? Like this was like ID Zero ramped up to 11 into like ID Zero was a show where the first half was pretty solid, a little goofy, and then the second half gets too goofy. And it was like, all right. You know, like that show went from like a strong 7 to like a decent 6, you know, because you didn't have that high of expectations for it anyways, and it didn't get that bad. This show went from like a strong 8 to like just worthless second half. Totally worthless. Like no merit at all. Worthless second half. So yeah, this is one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen. This is like the level of disappointment I felt for Zankyo no Terror, but like that show at least deteriorated so quickly that I didn't have to experience the full range of disappointment that I did with this one. I mean, that one I had a whole season, but like I only saw the first couple episodes when it started, and everyone had warned me that it turns to shit. I didn't know Kado turns to shit. I hadn't been warned. I was wondering why its score was so low, because I remembered at the start of the season it having like close to an 8, and now it has close to a 7 on Mal, and I wasn't sure what was the deal with that, and now I understand. But God. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Finish or Fail. I can't believe we haven't gotten a show I've finished and enjoyed yet. This was my first finish, and even I can barely count it as a finish because like I watched the last 2 episodes with my finger hitting the fucking skip button throughout because I was fucking done. But I had to at least know how it went before I would comment on it. Oh my god. Hopefully the next episode will have a finish. There's a show that me and May are 2/3 of the way through. Hopefully it holds up in a way that this show did not. I can only fucking pray. See you then.